I sit behind the burgundy drapes as my mother raises her arms wide and begins to sway rhythmically. Her eyes shut, her head thrown back, an expression of earnest supplication, suffrage, and delicate-featured face. Her reddish-brown curls swing behind her. Speak to me, Mary Adeline Treadwell. Her intone of her voice, throaty voice. Cease your lonely haunting of this house and come to us. She was seated at a round table. To her right were two middle-aged women, their hair pleated high on their heads, lace framing their hopeful faces. Owners of the house, they watched my mother with intense, expectant eyes. To her left was a balding, ill-at-ease man of about 70. Your sisters Gertrude and Julia are here, Mother went on. They sense your presence in this house. They have heard footsteps at night, noticed the furniture you have moved. Your husband, Mr. Richard, has joined us as well. It was their dearest wish for you to make yourself known to those of us present now. The luxurious drapes have been drawn, separating the white blast of afternoon light from the elegant high-ceilinged room. In the deep alcove behind the curtains, I could turn towards the street and see life proceeding as usual. Horse-drawn wagons trotting down the cobblestone streets, and women walking with parasols to protect them from the blazing summer sun. Their male partners properly attired in top hats and coats despite the heat. It was reassuring to be reminded of the normal life that was going on, especially with the scene unfolding in the darkened parlor room. I peered back through the break in the curtain and watched as my mother placed her hand on the table and told the others to do the same. You have been haunting this house of your childhood, Mary Adeline. Tarry no longer in the shadow of the afterlife. Those who have loved you in the life wish to know you still. A soft hand, not much larger than my own, reached out to clutch my fingers. My sister Mimi, who had also been shaken by the eeriness of it all, had come behind the curtain to hide. Ever the protective one, she had pulled our twin 2-year-old sister, Emily and Emma, asleep together in their large perambulator behind the drape with her. How old must we have been then? I'm certain it was the summer of 1898, which would have meant that I had just turned 4 and Mimi was 6. Mimi's large amber brown eyes sparked with terror even as her heart-shaped face radiated with startling beauty. The hand not holding mine, she nervously twitched one of her curls, raven black locks around her finger, a habit she would retain all her life. Even though Mimi looked as terrified as I felt, it was comfort to have my big sister there holding my hand. She might not be able to save me from the horror that could aside from summoning of the dead, but even at the young age I was confident that she would never abandon me. With the medium brown hair and more ordinary looks, I would always see myself as a plain brown sparrow next to her glossy beauty. But it never mattered. We were so close that I experienced her glory as simply a reason for sisterly pride. A woman's sharp grasp retrieved us from the scene. The table had begun to tip, first to one side and then to the other. The two women gazed at it, agape in horror. A man craned his neck below its top, searching for a source of the movement. The tipping increased in speed, and banging of the three-legged pedestal as it lifted from side to side, on the wooden parquet floor, creating an unsettling clatter. Mary Adeline, Mother implored, nearly shouting, "Speak to us. Haunt this house no more with coy signs. Instead, let us hear you directly." "Yes, talk to us, Mary Adeline," cried out one of the women. "It's me, Gertrude." The table settled into a slow rocking. Mother stood, relieving the round, pregnant belly beneath her flowering, vine-painted dress. Mimi's crushing pressure on my hand would have made me cry out if what I was seeing had not already rendered me speechless. Mother's eyes grew wider, and I had ever seen them. With her arms raised, she began to shiver as though the deep bone-chilling frigidity had descended upon her. I strained forward with an overwhelming impulse to wrap Mother in my arms and steady her violently convulsating frame. But Mimi's grab held me back. I beseeched Mimi with my eyes to let me go to our mother. Surely this couldn't be good for her or for the baby she was carrying. Mimi shook her head. "No, Jane," she whispered. "Stay back." She checked the sleeping twins with their darting glance and returned her firm hold on my hand. Mother's eyes rolled back in their sockets and she threw her head back and shook it violently. Then abruptly her head snapped forward. That beloved face, which I had until this moment experienced as being as familiar as my own, was completely transformed. It had grown timid, eyes uncertain, furtive. Gone, too, was the confident, bold posture I associated with her. In its place was a willowy stance that had never been hers. "Am I really back home?" she asked in a high, whispery voice, seeming confused. "Gertrude, Julia, is that you?" "It is," Gertrude volunteered eagerly. "How old you've gotten," Mother said with a gasp. "It's been 24 years since you died," Julia pointed out. "It has?" Mother pressed her hand on her chest in a gesture of surprise. "I have never seen her use. It seems to me that only a day has passed." She turned slowly to the man at the table. "My dear, you've lost your hair." She nodded and laughed lightly. "This is a fraud," the man shouted. I'll not stand for another second of it." He pushed back from the table so fiercely that the chair he had been sitting in toppled behind him. A squeal from the preambler made Mimi and me sharply turn towards it. Clatter of chair had stirred the twins in their sleep. Emma sputtered and fussed and settled back to sleep. Amelie, though, sat forward, her wide eyes locked in fascination on Mother. Mother retained her limp composure as Mr. Richard stormed out, slamming the door behind him. She bent toward Julia and Gertrude confidently. "The spiritual realm has always made him a little at ease," she said lightly, as if his departure was little consequence. "He's captain of industry, and you know how they are." "Of course we know," Julia said. "What man in our social circle is not?" Mother looked at Julia, blinked hard, and wilted into her chair, and then bent down on her chest. Again I tried to go to her, and once more Mimi held onto me. White vapor, like steam from the boiling pot of water, rose behind Mother. "What is that?" Gertrude asked, looking anxiously from Mother to Julia. Amelie pointed, learning so far that the preambler that I'd feared would fall. I nudged Mimi and signaled her to pull the baby sister in, which she did. Mother lifted her head in great effort. "Julia, waste no time. It is short." Mother stumbled forward on the table. This time I wouldn't allow Mimi to hold me back, and I raced from my hiding place and went to her side, shaking her. "Mama, Mama," I shouted. Wake up, please." Mama simply lay there, stumbling over, not stirring. Mimi threw the drapes aside, letting the sunlight once more flood the room, and Gertrude tried to arouse Mother with a shake and murmurs of solitude. Julia poured a glass of water from the crystal decanter on the sideboard and brought it to her. All the activity woke Emma, who ran and began to cry hurriedly. Mimi rocked the preambler fruitlessly, attempting to soothe her. Emma's wails only increased, which turned out to be fortunate since Mother lifted her head in response. Relieved beyond measure that she was alive, I threw my arms around her. She stroked my hair and then rose as though everything was perfectly fine. Crossing the room, she lifted Emma from the preambler and cradled her in the crook of her arm. Rocking her gently, the crying stopped. "Maud, you were magnificent," Gertrude praised her. "I have no doubt it was Mary Adeline that we spoke to," Julia added. Every gesture and intonation was hers. Mother seemed bewildered for a moment. "You mean it happened?" "Oh, yes," Gertrude told her. "Weren't you aware?" Mother shook her head. "No, I suppose I must have passed out. When I woke at the table, I assumed I had fainted." I looked up to Mimi, checking to see if she could make any sense of this. Mimi's eyes had narrowed, and her delicate dark brown of her postures reformation. Clearly she was as confused as I was, and I was working hard to sort it out. Did you see into the spirit world while you were in your trance? Gertrude asked Mother. Did you see Mary Adeline? No, I did not see your sister, Mother revealed, as she sat on the velvet chair, just gently jiggling Emma. She must have taken over my body and sent my spirit traveling elsewhere. You certainly have a gift. I'm so happy to have not been neglecting the potential when we saw you demonstrate as a girl, Gertrude gushed. Mother shook her head. Not true. Gertrude crooked her head to the side and gestured in confusion. I don't understand. You have been neglecting your gifts. Mother sighed and nodded. You ladies know that as a young woman I showed great promise as a medium. When your family visited mine back in Hydesville, you saw the demonstration of my gifts. I recall it well, Julia said. You were being monitored by Maggie Fox then. It's so sad she passed over. People said that she and her sisters were frauds. I never believed it. Leah, the eldest, was a fraud, but Kate and Maggie had a gift, Mother insisted. I did not know it then. I have since learned that the Fox sisters of Hydesville were famous spiritualists. When the ghosts of the dead parlor, who had once lived in their house and had stayed about to haunt it, contacted them with strange raps and thumps. They became sensations and started the movement known as spiritualism. We remember you clearly, Gertrude added. You were so young and yet so impressive when you contacted the spirit of our dead President, Mr. Lincoln. Mr. Lincoln was easy to find. He contacted seances in the White House, I'm told. His wife was a believer, Mother said. Don't be so modest, Gertrude chided. You have never forgotten your gifts. That is why you sought you out when we need to speak to Mary Adeline. We were thrilled to discover you living in Brooklyn. That was indeed destiny, because I have only just arrived in Brooklyn from Massachusetts in the past month, Mother said. My stay with my mother-in-law is only temporary, God willing. I am at loose ends since the death of my beloved husband, and I must decide where to take up permanent residence. I have a late come here about to enter community of spiritualists upstate, just south of Buffalo, Julia Treadwell told Mother. Now that you are a widow, perhaps it would be a hospitable environment in which to raise your daughters. It sounds compelling, Mother allowed. Julia went to the sideboard and took out a pad and pencil. She wrote something on the paper and handed it to Mother. Mother read the name of the paper on the pad and put it in the crocheted bag she carried on her wrist. Holding Amelie in one arm and Emma on the other, she beckoned Mimi and me to push the empty preambler and follow her to the door. Good day, ladies, she said to Julia and Gertrude, as the Treadwell's butler held open the door for us. Thank you so much for telling me about this town. It might be just the spot I have been seeking. Your fee, Julia reminded Mother, hurrying to drop the envelope in the purse. Oh yes, Mother said. I'd nearly forgotten about it. Maud, what do you think Mary Adeline meant when she said time was short? Julia asked, her voice touched with a quivering tremble. I have no way to know, Mother said softly. But time is fleeting for all of us. It's advice we could all use. Then why did she not say the same thing to Gertrude? Julia asked. Why did she address it to me specifically? Mother pressed Julia's hand in her own. The mystery of life and death are as unknown to me as they are to you. She says I'm sorry. When the door to the Treadwell's Bricks Row house was closed, Mother hurried us several buildings down the street. Only then did she stop and count the money in her envelope. A smile slowly spread across her face. There's money enough for the supper and a train fare tomorrow, she told us. The train, where are we going? Mimi asked. I'm not exactly sure at the moment, Mother admitted, stroking her rounded belly. We need to go somewhere so that I can think about it more carefully. She didn't know it, but we had already stepped on the path.